A shocking moment in Texas yesterday when Beto O'Rourke interrupted a briefing on the Uvalde school massacre, heckling Governor Greg Abbott, the man whom O'Rourke is currently running to replace, as well as the other Republican leaders in the room.
Excuse me. It was after Santa Fe High School.
Sit down.
You're out of line and an embarrassment.
Hey.
It was after El Paso.
Sit down and don't play
Stop. The next shooting is right now, and you are doing nothing.
No,
you're offering us nothing.
Out of here.
You
this
said
is
this
the
is
place
not
to talk this over.
predictable. This is totally predictable when you
Sir, you're out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Please leave this auditorium.
So you need to exit. You need to exit.
Get out of here, please.
I can't believe you're a sick son of a that would come to a deal like this to make a political issue.
Emily, this was one of the most shameful things I have ever seen from a political actor. I am thinking, as someone, if you're a parent or a relative and you lost a loved one, everyone grieves differently, and maybe some parents could not bear to watch that press conference, but I am sure there were others trying to collect every single detail about how their son or daughter lost their life, what their last moments were like, how long the shooter was in that room, every last detail they could soak up. And to have a Democrat gubernatorial candidate stand up and interrupt local officials is nothing short of shameful.
An actor indeed, Kayleigh. He's a performative clown. He's reprehensible. He's a joke. I don't want to give him any more airtime. He's not worth it. He's a waste of flesh. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said it best. He said, "You're out of line. You're an embarrassment." The mayor of Uvalde also said it best. He said, "You're out of line. Leave the auditorium. I cannot believe you are a sick son of a bee who would come to a deal like this to make a political issue." That's unfortunately exactly what we get by that despicable person. I don't even want to say his name. He's not worth it.
Yeah, that's right, Morgan. And it was a stunt. It was planned. As the CBS reporter said, she was in the third row across the aisle. There was a seat holder, and moments before this press conference began, the seat holder switched places with the Democrat gubernatorial candidate.
So when I heard about this yesterday, it was almost unbelievable, Kayleigh. You know, I thought, how could he turn something so precious, you know, something so important to these families, as Emily just noted, into a political stunt? One of the things that I'll say is there's plenty of people that are feeling a lot of anger in this country towards what's happening towards our children, and they're in the schools, and there's a robust political debate about it, around it. So I understand there's a perspective of a lot of people are feeling anger, right? People are feeling sadness. They're grieving differently, as you said. So if the Democratic candidate, if Robert Francis would like to channel that anger, I think he can do that. But that was just the most inappropriate place to do it. But I understand there's a range of emotions right now that people are feeling, just not the time and place.
Chris, and then he left the room. He's escorted out, and he takes questions from reporters outside.
You know, being angry is totally allowable. Having policy ideas is totally allowable. And I know this has been a bit of a political Rorschach test for people who are supporters of his gun policy, say this is a proud moment, and those who are against it, and the parents there and the victims there are totally aghast at that spectacle. My issue here is that if we're looking for solutions to this rising problem, this awful problem, it's a lazy idea. Guns haven't become more lethal since Columbine. The technology hasn't gotten more dangerous since Columbine. What has changed a lot is our social media aspects, like we were talking about in an earlier segment. The fact that bullying at school continues buzzing in your pocket after you leave. The fact that the media creates a circus around certain aspects of this. The fact that it's impossible to get away, and the fact that it's easier and easier to find these really dark communities in there that fulfill some of your crazier ideas. That's what's really changed in the last 30 years. And before that, well, we always had guns. We didn't have this. So I'm with Beto on trying to find some kind of solutions here. I just want to find one that's actually real.
Now, Harris, another tweet caught my eye last night. It's from former President Obama. We'll pull it up. He said, "As we grieve for the children of Uvalde today, we should take time to recognize the 2 years have passed since the murder of George Floyd under the knee of a police officer. His killing stays with us all to this day, especially those who loved him." I just wasn't sure why he needed to connect to unrelated events in a tweet like that.
Well, I mean, he was welcome to bring that up until this happened, perhaps within that same sphere. And I'm not saying that we can't hold ideas at the same time in our head. But the two are not connected. And when they come from a former president, it's not like you or I saying that. And I choose my words very carefully on this because we all had lives to go on with yesterday. But that's not what this was about with the president. It felt like the former president leaned in, Barack Obama, for a political moment. And if he didn't, then perhaps he'd like to explain that. Beto O'Rourke definitely did that. I remember late last year when the Texas Tribune was writing how politically damaged Beto O'Rourke was. He came in, they said, as a weakened candidate because of all of his tries to take a seat in that state after being a congressperson for a short period. So, thirst for relevance will get you to do these things. I don't think that Barack Obama needs to do that. He's much more popular in the Democrat Party than the current president. So maybe there was some other reason why he wanted to tie those two things together. It would interest maybe a lot of us to know exactly what that was.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.